key. And this is treason. This is a national disgrace. And I'm so glad that John is on the show tonight talking about it, because the more of us that talk about it seriously and point out that there are two programs, and all the astronauts risking their lives in this rat trap called the Shuttle are basically doing it because they believe in God and country, and how the hell they wind up going up on that thing when there is real technology to go all over the solar system. It has to be because someone appeals to their higher patriotic purpose, and they say, mankind needs you to do this. Well, mankind doesn't. These rogue groups are running the program, and even Ed Mitchell, the Apollo 14 astronaut who walks on the moon, has said again and again and again that the rogue groups have taken over the programs, and they're running the show.
You agree with all this, John Lear?
Absolutely. Richard is right on, right dead center.
It's pretty startling, I think, just to even imagine that this could be going on.
Well, he has so much evidence over so many years, and the really pernicious part, George, is you got to ask yourself, they used to say that the only difference between men and boys was the price of their toys.
Yeah.
These are very pricey toys. Then you have to ask the question, if they're secret and they're in the hands of people that have no accountability, and we just saw today what happens when you have government agencies running loose with no accountability, every single phone call recorded since 2001 by the NSA.
Do you believe, because I got to get into this with John soon about his belief in life on the planets in this solar system, but do you, Richard, believe that these structures on the moon may have been the ones that Ingo Swann has always said that he saw during his remote viewing episodes?
Yeah, because he saw things on the moon and on Mars. And some of the things on Mars, remember, even Dame says some of the stuff on Mars is still, quote, alive, meaning it's ticking, it's technology that's still functioning. And our models cover that. The hyperdimensional physics says you can produce technology that will last, hundreds of thousands, not millions of years, because you're not using any known power sources. The stuff doesn't have friction. It doesn't wear out. It doesn't corrode. So, yes, you can certainly envision robotic emplacements of things that are still active. We see in these photographs ruin after ruin after ruin. I mean, when you come to Joshua Tree on the Columbus Day weekend, which is a 4-day weekend, we're going to do this up really well in the desert with a lot of interesting material, with enough time to go through it. I am going to show you stuff on the moon that will knock your socks off.
All right. John Lear, what about the propulsion of these vehicles, then, if there's this other program underway? Where are they taking off from? 51?
No, the only place that I know for sure is Sandia. They're north of Kirtland Air Force Base.
I'd also look to the outback of Australia, gentlemen.
Yeah.
In the middle of a continent which has only 13 million people, and most of them are Aborigines.
Yeah.
You could create entire cities, George, in the middle of Australia, and no one would ever know. But we do have reports, Aboriginal reports, of very strange things happening. That's where Pine Gap is located. Remember that facility? I think Australia is the place because it's literally on the opposite sides of the planet from 535 people who are supposed to be minding the store and have been looking the other way for 50 years.
All right, Richard. We'll get those pictures to John because I'm sure he'll love to see them.
Thanks, Richard.
All right, Richard. Thanks. Appreciate you being part of this. Well, John, I guess common sense would tell you this can't be, I guess. Don't you think?
That what?
That this can't be. There can't be another program out there that's been so technologically advanced. My mind just doesn't want to believe it.
Well, let me tell you this. In 1956, my dad was heavily involved in anti-gravity research. As a matter of fact, floating around the Internet, there's a 2-minute film of him giving a lecture at the Bonson Institute, and behind him is a blackboard, and he's explaining how flying saucers fly. My mother is standing next to him, and then in this 2-minute film, for some reason, there's a calendar. Something is very, very important, and they're marking off the days, and then they have a picture of a lab, and they have very flimsy type tissue paper and balsa paper constructed models of flying saucers, and I don't know what that's all about, but I do know this. When in the last 35 years have you read in any technical journal, any aerospace journal, any airplane journal, anything about anti-grav? You haven't read anything, and the reason is because they've already solved it.
All I heard was when I was in St. Louis, and at one time, it was the headquarters for McDonnell Douglas before they got bought out by Boeing. I had heard that they were working on some kind of anti-gravity device somewhere, maybe out on the West Coast. But that's it.
And what year was that?
That would have been about 99, I think I would have heard the story.
Well, they had all this completely solved and ready to go in the early 60s, and they've had it since then. But you're not going to see anything in Aviation Week. You're not going to see anywhere else any remotely discussing the subject of anti-grav because they've already got it.
What about the whistleblowers? How come they're not coming forward?
Well, I'll tell you, there used to be whistleblowers, but there aren't any more, George. In 1989, 1990, when I first got into this, there was guys coming from the black areas up at Area 51, and they'd knock on the door, and if I wasn't there, they'd tell my wife, they'd say, I work up in the black area, I just wanted to tell you your husband is right on. And then about 1991, it stopped. Somehow they figured out how to keep a secret. And I haven't heard a decent rumor since then.
Do you think anything happened to these people?
No. Well, maybe they did. But there was 4 or 5 of them that used to come by and give me little tidbits. But that ended in 1990, 1991, thereabouts.
And they just stay away from you now?
Oh, yeah. They're somehow they've learned to keep a secret. It could be mind control, whatever it is. But a secret is a secret now, and it's very difficult to find out. The only way I get information, and I had 2 sources, they're both dead now. They were in the program, they had been in the program forever, all their lives, and they were about to pass away, they were about to die, and I had a chance to sit down with them and talk with them.
John, have you had friends or colleagues, people who've been pilots, who have called you over the years saying, you're right on, John, we've seen things? I mean, do they come out and support you, or do they run away from you?
No, usually they don't talk about it, but just tonight I heard a really funny story. There was an old cargo airline I used to work for. It was called Rosenbaum, and they were doing a cargo flight about 1 o'clock in the morning from Chicago to Seattle. The guy who told me this was the flight engineer, Mike Tydell, and they're flying along, and they're looking ahead. They're up about 35,000 feet. They're looking ahead because air traffic control had given them a FedEx, 12 o'clock, 20 miles. Yeah. And, of course, you always look to see the airplane to be sure that, the spacing is correct and everything. And they're looking ahead, and behind this FedEx, this huge circle, lighted globe, comes whizzing toward them, at 10,000 miles an hour, just when it gets between FedEx and these guys' airplanes, that heads north towards the North Pole, and they watch this thing, zip as far as the eye could see. It was huge, and as it disappeared, there was a total silence for about 5 seconds, and then the co-pilot says, "Now there's something you don't see every day." It was hilarious. Everybody started laughing.
I love it.
Real low key. Now there's something you don't see every day.
Why don't you have a website, by the way?
I don't know. I just
you don't have anything to gain here tonight, John.
No, and I'm so busy I wouldn't have time to keep it up. And
also, there was a 10-year hiatus before you came back to talk on Coast, and over that span, why did you stay away, and then what made you come back?
Well, I don't remember exactly the reason. I think it may have been, that 10 years, I think that started in 92 or 93. I don't remember exactly what kicked it off, but you get to a point where you don't learn anymore, and then you get tired of it, and then you don't want to hear any more stories, and you just walk away. You're busy. I was busy flying. That was towards the end of my career, and I was busy with the 1011 and different airlines. Yeah. And one night, Art called and said, man, I want you to do a show and everything. And he more or less talked me into it, and so I got back into it.
He has a way of doing that.
Yeah, he sure does.
Okay, stay with us, John. Back with you in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Well, now it gets really wild. John Lear believes all the planets in the solar system are inhabited by beings much like us. We'll get his take on that. And I got to tell you, what a fast program tonight. I think we have a new propulsion system behind us. This may be one of the fastest shows I've ever participated in. Back in a moment with John Lear on Coast to Coast AM.